Public Bill, second reading.
Yes, Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes, Madam Speaker, with your permission, I move that the Finance Bill number 12 of 2026 and the Economic and Financial Measures Miscellaneous Provisions Bill number 13 of 2026 be read a second time and considered together. Madam Speaker, we are not here today to reopen the debate on the measures announced in the budget speech and its annex. These two bills simply give legal effect to the measures that have already been debated and approved by the National Assembly. These two bills, Madam Speaker, bring amendments to a total of 83 enactments relating to policies and measures announced in the budget speech of 2026-2027 and its annex, and for matters connected, consequential, or incidental thereto. Madam Speaker, I will start with amendments being brought under the Finance Bill of 2026. Clause 2 amends the Customs Act in order to tighten customs compliance and penalties by requiring full prepayment of duties and taxes before clearance, and by enhancing risk-based controls on imports. This, Madam Speaker, will close loopholes, will reduce leakages, and reinforce the integrity of our border tax regime. Clause 3 amends the Customs Tariff Act to clarify tariff administration and to adjust selected custom duties and exemptions in line with the measures announced in the budget. Through these adjustments, we support productive sectors, ensure greater predictability for importers, and maintains coherence between tariff policy and our broader economic objectives. Clause 4 amends the Excise Act to extend an excise duty on all plastic bottles and to update excise measures on hard liquor, tobacco, sugar-sweetened products, and related duty-free facilities. This clause reflects our commitment to public health and environmental sustainability. Clause 5 amends the Finance and Audit Act to shorten timelines for financial reporting and audit and to align central government and public sector accounts with international public sector accounting standards. By doing so, we are improving the timeliness, the transparency and comparability of our public finances, which is essential for fiscal discipline and credibility. Clause 6 amends the Gambling Regulatory Authority Act to modernize the gambling framework for interactive and digital gaming and to strengthen governance, supervision, and responsible gambling. This clause brings our regulatory architecture in line with technological developments, while at the same time safeguarding vulnerable groups and reinforcing oversight of this sensitive sector. Clause 7 amends the Income Tax Act to rebalance the income tax structure and incentives, to implement technical changes related to the qualified domestic minimum top-up tax, and to adjust exemptions and tax holidays. Through these measures, Madam Speaker, we are maintaining our competitiveness within the evolving international tax landscape. Clause 8 amends the Inscription of Privileges and Mortgages Act to mandate the electronic registration of deeds by attorneys at law instead of only notaries. This modernization supports digitalization, improves efficiency, and reduces the scope for errors and delays in the registration process. Clause 9 amends the Land Duties and Taxes Act to maintain the competitiveness of real estate schemes while introducing a special levy and rationalization exemptions. The intention is to balance the attractiveness of Mauritius as an investment destination with a fair contribution to government revenue and overall development. Clause 10 amends the Mauritius Revenue Authority Act to first introduce a framework for compliance agreement, second, to authorize the MRA to share information on individuals and businesses involved in online commercial activities, including unregistered traders, with the Ministry of Commerce and Consumer Protection. 3, extend the application of provisions relating to stay or assessment in cases involving non-remission of tourist fees collected where the matter is referred to a law enforcement agency for parallel investigation, and 4, to provide for flexibility in the registration of a tax agent. Clause 10, therefore, promotes a more collaborative approach between the tax administration and taxpayers while ensuring that intermediaries operate to the highest professional and ethical standards. Clause 11 amends the National Assembly Retiring Allowances Act to modernize the pension arrangements of members of Parliament, including the introduction of a new defined contribution scheme with appropriate grandfathering provisions. It preserves acquired rights while placing parliamentary pensions on a more sustainable and transparent footing for the future. Madam Speaker, as I've already stated, we have not abandoned the gist of the pension reform, except for the means test, which is out. We took note of the concerns and decided to discard the means test. Listening to people does not mean ignoring reality or denying the challenges we face. The demographic and fiscal pressures remain, and reform is therefore still necessary. That is our responsibility. The real choice before the country is not between reform and comfort. That choice does not exist. The real choice is between a controlled reform today or a brutal crisis tomorrow. Clause 12 amends the National Pensions Act to 1, support the transition from the basic retirement pension to the state age pension. 2, to adjust eligibility and residency rules. And 3, to set up a steering committee to advise on the establishment of a new pension regulatory framework. Madam Speaker, although I believe that the current provision is clear in regard to our policy intention regarding the increase in state age pension, after taking into consideration the cost of living, I will nevertheless bring an amendment at committee stage as per the amendment which I hope has been circulated to Section 3C in Clause 12 of the bill to remove any possible confusion or doubt in the mind of the public. Clause 13 amends the Pension Act to clarify the circumstances in which retirement requires presidential approval and to allow recovery of sums due to government when an officer exits the public service. Clause 14 amends the President's Emoluments and Pensions Act to recalibrate the pension of the President and Vice President and their surviving spouses net of any non-contributory state pensions. Clause 15 amends the Public Debt Management Act to strengthen reporting obligations and standards for public sector debt and fiscal risk. This, Madam Speaker, will improve quality, completeness, and timeliness of debt data, thereby reinforcing our capacity to manage public debt prudently and transparently. Clause 16 amends the registration duty to adjust registration duties, penalties, and remission powers, particularly in respect of first-time buyers and land surveyor reports. It refines our regime to deter abuse, provides targeted relief where warranted, and provides the Minister of Finance with a structured mechanism to address technical and administrative cases. Clause 17 amends the Revenue Tribunal Act to standardize the amount payable on tax and customs appeals lodged with the Revenue Tribunal. This, Madam Speaker, promotes consistency, predictability, and fairness in the appeals process for taxpayers. Clause 18 amends the Social Contribution and Social Benefits Act to provide for the payment of retirement, benefit, or disability allowances due but unpaid at the time of the beneficiary's death to the spouse or legal heirs of the deceased. Clause 19 amends the schedule on the Social Integration and Empowerment Act to increase the monthly income threshold to be eligible for beneficiaries under the Social Register of Mauritius with effect from the 1st of July 2026. Clause 20 amends the State Lands Act to remove the deferment facilities granted to industrial site leases during the COVID-19 pandemic with effect from the 1st of July 2027 in order to strengthen government revenue mobilization while allowing stakeholders sufficient time to settle outstanding amounts. Clause 21 amends the Statistics Act to recognize public sector debt statistics as official statistics, thereby enhancing the credibility and the transparency of public debt reporting while providing greater operational flexibility to Statistics Mauritius in the collection and dissemination of statistical information. Clause 22 amends the Statutory Bodies Accounts and Audit Act to require that at least 25% of the members of every board should be women and to bring the real estate agent authority under the scope of the Act. Clause 23 amends the Statutory Bodies Pension Funds, the Act, to clarify the benefits payable to officers leaving a statutory body, allow the recovery of outstanding amounts owed by an officer to government or a statutory body before any refund is made, and include the real estate agent authority in the first schedule to enable it to establish a pension fund for its employees. Clause 24 amends the Transcription and Mortgage Act to require attorneys at law to submit registration documents electronically through the Registrar General's online system and increases the fees for searches on the immovable property database. Clause 25 introduces several amendments to the Value-Added Tax Act to modernize the VAT framework, strengthen tax administration, and improve compliance. The amendments provide for charging of VAT on the commission received by foreign operators of online marketplaces and enforce enforcement measures, revise VAT obligations for digital service providers, introduce a 5% insurance premium tax on short-term general insurance from the 1st of January 2027, and clarify VAT treatment for various sectors and transactions. They also include measures to facilitate invoicing compliance, improve recovery and reporting procedures, align VAT provisions with international standards, and extend exemptions or zero rating on selected goods and services. Clause 27 validates the resolution passed by the National Assembly on the 19th of June 2026 relating to the increase in excise duty rates on hard liquor, tobacco products, and sugar-sweetened products. Madam Speaker, I now turn to the Economic and Financial Measures Miscellaneous Provisions Bill of 2026. This bill introduces amendments across a wide range of legislations to secure financial stability, enhance governance, and support our economic and social priorities. Clause 2 amends the Bank of Mauritius Act to first enable government to issue longer-term bonds of up to 30 years in line with our strategy to lengthen debt maturity and reduce risk. 2, to establish a cyber threat intelligence sharing platform for the financial sector. 3, to provide for the Ministry of Finance, after consultation with the Governor of the Bank of Mauritius, to transfer funds to the Bank of Mauritius to increase its paid-up capital. And 4, to upgrade the qualification requirements of the chairperson of the Banking Services Review Panel. Clause 3 amends Section 64 of the Banking Act to ensure that bank secrecy cannot be used to block access to customer information needed for investigations under the Financial Crimes Commission Act or under the UN Sanctions Law. It clarifies the process, Madam Speaker, for disclosure orders, extends disclosure beyond money laundering to a broader range of financial crimes, and confirms that these disclosures and reporting obligations override the statutory duty of compliance, but it has to follow due process, while also fixing a drafting cross-reference. Clause 4 amends the Business Registration Act to allow a business to displace business registration in any format and at its principal place of business. Clause 5 amends the Captive Insurance Act to empower the Financial Services Commission to extend on application and for valid reasons the time limits for regulatory returns and filing by captive insurance. Clause 6 amends the Civil Service Family Protection Scheme Act to improve representation on the board and thereby strengthen its governance. Clause 7 amends the Civil Status Act to allow a non-citizen married to a Mauritian outside Mauritius to either submit an official document from a competent authority attesting marital status when applying for a temporary residence permit, or provide an affidavit sold before the Supreme Court of Mauritius. This is consequential to the amendments of the Immigration Act. Clause 8 amends the Clinical Trials Act to provide for expanded electronic processes, fast-track committees, clinical trials in public hospitals, clearer licensing and investigator accreditation, and liability protections. The aim is to refine the clinical trials framework and bring it in line with the international best practices. Clause 9 amends the Code Civil Mauritian to remove the obligation for a seller of a motor vehicle to remit a certificat de gage sans déplacement, where the registration is initiated through the Registrar General's online portal. This amendment therefore cuts one administrative step, reduces paperwork and the need to queue up at multiple counters, and speed up online registration of second-hand vehicles. Clause 10 amends the Companies Act to strengthen beneficial ownership transparency, extend name reservation periods, adjust various technical provisions, and facilitate adoption of sustainability reporting standards. Clause 11 amends the Competition Act to reinforce the framework for market inquiries by empowering the Competition Commission to issue directions, extend undertakings, and appeal rights to such inquiries and enhance transparency and participation. Clause 12 amends the Cooperative Act to modernize the regulatory framework, including updated definitions, minimum capital and eligibility requirements, stronger internal controls, risk-based supervision, and clearer rules for dormant societies and fees. Clause 13 amends the Courts Act to broaden the category of forensic reports admissible in evidence without requiring the attendance of the scientific officer unless the court considers the officer's attendance absolutely necessary. Clause 14 amends the Early Childhood Care and Education Authority Act to clarify that a pre-primary school is not limited to a school or to a unit located within the premises of a primary school. This amendment removes a long-lasting anomaly regarding pre-primary school sector. Clause 15 amends the Economic Development Board Act to introduce the Golden Visa and the AI City Scheme, to rationalize certain schemes and review occupation permit criteria. The amendment will enable the EDB to attract more productive investment and higher skills. Clause 16 amends the Energy Efficiency Act to establish a regulatory framework for energy performance contracting, strengthen the role of the Energy Efficiency Management Office, and increase penalties and regulatory powers to promote energy efficiency. This amendment is necessary to set a strong foundation for economic growth that will be led by the energy sector. Clause 17 amends the Environment Act to clarify the scope and coverage of environment protection fee relating to an enterprise engaged in stone crushing or the processing of aggregates, rock sand, or basalt sand to avoid double payment of the environment protection fee. It also allows for the increase of fines or offenses relating to illegal dumping of waste and other materials, littering the public places and natural sites, non-compliance with an ISO abatement notice, and the unauthorized display of posters or defacement of designated site. This amendment, Madam Speaker, strengthens environmental sustainability by reinforcing deterrence against activities that harm our natural environment. Clause 18 amends the Financial Intelligence and Anti-Money Laundering Act to expand the definition of credit unions to include societies under the Cooperatives Act, which provide financial services to their members. The amendment also removes the limitation on the power of the Financial Services Commission to sanction financial institutions for non-compliance with the AML-CFT requirements. The same amendment excludes low-risk third-party administrators from the AML-CFT obligations. Clause 19 amends the Financial Reporting Act to introduce sustainability reporting standards and provide for the enforcement by the Financial Reporting Council. Clause 20 amends the Financial Services Act to establish a National FinTech Governance Committee, strengthen the FSC's supervisory and enforcement powers, including conservatorship and advertising controls, and introduce a private wealth management license. Together, Madam Speaker, clauses 18 to 20 strengthen Mauritius' reputation as a clean, transparent, and forward-looking financial sector. Clause 21 amends the Food and Agricultural Research and Extension Institute Act, first to introduce definitions of food security and national food security strategy, two, to broaden the objectives of the Food and Agricultural Research and Extension Institute by designating it as a national authority responsible for planning, coordinating, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating food security programs, and for leading the implementation of national food security, food sovereignty, and food self-sufficiency targets. Third, preparation of annual food security reports. And fourth, to empower FARI to establish interinstitutional committees, require relevant ministries, institutions, and agencies to submit information required to monitor food security targets, to appoint food security experts on a contractual basis, and to facilitate public-private ventures and contract farming. Clause 22 amends the Foundations Act to clarify which charitable foundations are subject to AML CFT inspections and to require dates of birth in beneficial ownership registers. Clause 23 amends the Freeport Act to remove the prescribed time limit on private freeport developers for warehousing authorization. Clause 24 amends the Higher Education Act to strengthen quality assurance, including for micro-credentials and foundation programs, and to clarify the role and funding functions of the Higher Education Commission. Clause 25 amends the Immigration Act to modernize occupational permits, align with ADB reforms, introduce prescribed fees and documentation for spouses, and establish a digital travel authorization regime. This amendment, Madam Speaker, represents an important step towards a more modern, predictable, and secure immigration framework at a time when demographic growth is negative, with a consequential decline in our labor force. Madam Speaker, importantly, in Clause 25, I am removing the discretionary power of the minister to whom the responsibility for the subject of home affairs is assigned. That is, in our case, the Prime Minister himself, to cancel the visa of a non-citizen in the public interest. That discretionary power is being removed completely. As a result, such decision will henceforth be based on rules rather than on discretion. Clause 26 amends the Industrial Property Act to give effect to the Harare Protocol on ARIPO titles and to align the institutional framework accordingly. Clause 27 amends the International Financial Organizations Act to update references and governance provisions relating to the Bretton Woods and related institutions and to repeal obsolete schedules. Clause 28 amends the Irrigation Authority Act to allow authorized officers to enter specified lands within irrigation areas to verify compliance with land use conditions. Clause 29 amends the Jewelry Act to extend the assay officer's supervisory remit over dealers in precious metals and stones for AML CFT purposes, allow sanctions for non-compliance, and lengthen record-keeping periods. Clause 30 amends the Land Drainage Authority Act to enhance coordination between the Land Drainage Authority and the National Development Unit, provide for fees and charges to be levied, and improve governance on drainage projects. This amendment will facilitate the timely implementation of land drainage projects, strengthen flood mitigation efforts, and provide better protection to families communities and businesses affected by recurrent flooding. Clause 31 amends the Law Officers Act to update provisions following institutional changes and to clarify the circumstances in which a law officer and state attorney may appear on behalf of entities in which the state has interest. Clause 32 amends the Limited Liability Partnership Act and Clause 33, the Limited Partnership Act, to extend name reservation periods, raise the turnover threshold for small partnerships, and requires dates of birth in beneficial ownership registers. Clause 34 amends the Mauritius Agricultural Marketing Act to increase applicable fines and imprisonment terms, thereby strengthening enforcement. Clause 35, again, Madam Speaker, it amends the Mauritius Citizenship Act to remove the discretionary powers of the Prime Minister and Minister of Home Affairs to deprive citizenship without reasons and to make the regime more rule-based. This is to address the infamous Hoffman Law, which was passed specifically for one person. Clause 36 amends the Mauritius Institute of Training and Development Act to add a representative of the Ministry of Tourism to the board and increase the quorum. Clause 37 amends the Mauritius Qualifications Authority Act to provide for the registration and deregistration of trainers and to strengthen the national qualifications framework. Clause 38 amends the Morcellement Act to remove certain requirements relating to association foncière and green forest and to provide transitional arrangements. Clause 39 repeals the National Environment Cleaning Authority Act to wind up that authority. Thus, only Mauri Facilities Management Company Limited will operate in that sector, avoiding duplication and suboptimal use of resources. The detailed transitional provisions for staff assets, liabilities, and acts of NECA are being addressed at Clause 60. Clause 40 amends the National Land Transport Authority Act to review the licensing board's framework, introduce structured procedures and rights of appeal for license applications, and reinforce conflict of interest rules. Clause 41 amends the Non-Citizens Employment Restriction Act to create a student employment permit regime with associated procedures, offenses, and penalties for foreign students and employers who fail to comply with the new requirements. Clause 42 amends the Ports Act to require the Director of Shipping to verify vessels' compliance certificates before granting inwards clearance, thereby enhancing maritime safety and environmental protection. Clause 43 amends the Private Health Institutions Act to introduce a formal application and approval in principle process for the new or expanded private health institutions. Clause 44 amends the Private Pension Scheme to provide that abandoned entitlements are transferred to the curator of vacant estates. Clause 45 amends the Public Health Act to introduce fixed penalty notices for unlawful waste disposal and storage that create public health risk. Clause 46 amends the Public Holidays Act so that when a public holiday falls on a Sunday, the following Monday is also a public holiday. Clause 47 amends the Public Procurement Act to allow direct procurement of specialized services from diaspora members under prescribed conditions. This will facilitate great engagement of the Mauritian diaspora and leveraging their expertise and international experience for national development. Clause 48 amends the Road Traffic Act to establish a traffic management and road safety unit, modernize vehicle registration procedures, expand regulation, making powers, and penalize excessive noise from altered silencers. Clause 49 amends the Small Farmers Welfare Fund Act to clarify key definitions and to increase the maximum number of cattle from 40 to 50 to qualify for support from the Small Farmers Welfare Fund. Clause 50 amends the Sugar Industry Efficiency Act to abolish the land conversion exception following the discontinuation of the integrated modern agricultural Morcellement scheme. Clause 51 amends the Tourism Authority Act to regulate outdoor accommodation and motorized water sports, harmonize alcohol limits with what is prescribed under the Road Traffic Act, and enhance safety on pleasure crafts. Clause 52 amends the Trust Fund for Specialized Medical Care Act to broaden its functions and to perform the duties conferred to it under the Clinical Trials Act. Clause 53 amends the United Nations Financial Prohibitions, Arms Embargo, and Travel Ban Sanctions, that is the Sanctions Act, to improve the functioning of the National Sanctions Committee and clarify procedures and third-party rights in relation to freezing and prohibition orders. Clause 54 amends the Variable Capital Companies Act to allow protected cell companies to convert into variable capital companies with legal continuity. The amendment allows a protected cell company to be converted into a variable capital company, thereby providing greater flexibility for investment structures, facilitating businesses, and ensuring continuity of existing legal rights, obligations, and operations during the conversion process. That is for the whole restructuring of the business. Clause 55 amends the Veterinary Council Act to revise the quorum requirement. Clause 56 amends the Virtual Asset and Initial Token Offering Services Act to tighten governance of virtual asset service providers, to prohibit unlicensed solicitation, and allow tax authorities to assess crypto asset information. Clause 57 amends the Waqf Act to ensure compliance with the Mauritius AML CFT CPF framework. Clause 58 amends the Waste Management and Resource Recovery Act to redefine the definition of waste carrier, strengthen licensing and registration for waste transport and importation, and clarify responsibilities. Clause 59 amends the workers' right to introduce paid menstrual leave, extend maternity leave to 6 months, with, of course, an additional option, as we said, for another 6 months on half pay, and lengthen paternity leave. Finally, Madam Speaker, Clause 28 of the Finance Bill 2026 and Clause 61 under the Economic and Financial Measures, that is the Miscellaneous Provisions Bill, provide for the commencement of the various amendments under this bill, either on specified dates or by proclamation or on publication in the Government Gazette. Madam Speaker, an amendment will be made to Clause 61, Subclause 2 and Subclause 7 of the Economic and Financial Measures Miscellaneous Provisions Bill at committee stage to provide for the measure on the extension of the maternity leave and the paternity leave to be effective as from the 1st of January 2027 instead of the 1st of July 2026 to allow proper human resource planning. I would like to inform the House, Madam Speaker, that we will come with the required legislative and operational framework for the implementation of the digital e-visa system, parallel imports, and anti-abusing pricing practices. These measures require more time for preparation before implementation. Madam Speaker, to conclude, as I bring this second reading speech to a close, I reaffirm the unwavering commitment of this government to the vision set out in Budget 2026-2027. These bills give legislative effect to the reforms that are guided by the 4 principles that define our approach to nation building. That is responsabilité, solidarité, efficacité économique, et justice sociale. They are more than a collection of legislative amendments. Together, they provide the legal framework to restore fiscal sustainability, strengthen our institutions, modernize our economy, reinforce our social contract, and prepare Mauritius for the challenges of an increasingly uncertain world. The future, Madam Speaker, cannot be secured by postponing difficult decisions. It is built by having the courage to act today. Fiscal consolidation is not an end in itself. It is the means by which we restore the strength of the state, preserve confidence in our public finances, and ensure that future generations inherit a country that is resilient, competitive, and able to protect the most vulnerable. As I said in the budget speech, the future depends on what we do in the present. These bills translate that conviction into action. They lay the foundation of a future-ready Mauritius. That is one that is fiscally responsible, economically stronger, socially fairer, and better equipped to seize the opportunities of tomorrow. The reforms, Madam Speaker, which are before this House, demand courage and perseverance. But they are reforms that are taken not for the next election, but for the next generations. With the confidence in our people and faith in our country's future, this government will continue to take the decisions that are necessary to secure lasting prosperity for all Mauritians. Madam Speaker, with these words, I now commend the bill to the House.
Thank you. And seconded by the Deputy Prime